Now, can being weird be a good thing? I think yes, when that weirdness expresses itself by imitating Christ. I think being weird can be a good thing when we take seriously what Christ took seriously. Being called weird is a compliment if it is because, as a minor, you won't go to parties where alcohol is served. Or as an adult, you won't frequent places where alcohol is abused. Being called weird is a compliment if it's because you won't use illegal drugs or abuse legal drugs. Being called weird is a compliment if it is because you want to wait until marriage to be sexually intimate. Being called weird is a compliment if it's because you would rather go to church on Sunday morning than sleep in, or to stay out until all hours of the morning. Being called weird is a compliment if it's because you won't shoplift or steal or vandalize someone else's property. Being called weird is a compliment if it's because you are content to not go along with the crowd, because you know who you are and whose you are. You can dare to be different. Not just to be different, but to be weird, because you belong to God and have been set aside for a holy purpose. This is sanctification. This is hagiazo, to be set apart, to be holy, to be like Christ. Thus, a plate or a cup or even an individual life becomes holy in serving its purpose. It becomes then the chalice and the paten. It becomes the disciple. Brent has a quote from his book, The Wisdom of Tenderness, that I think is fitting here. He writes, "The response the Father seeks to his extravagant generosity, and the sign that we are living in the wisdom of God's tenderness, is that we love, honor, serve, and revere his only Son, as he manifests himself in the least of our brethren." This is how we are sanctified. It is also what makes us divinely weird. Now, I know that some of our youth will be going on with me this summer to New Orleans. And I am looking forward to seeing some of that weirdness as 37,000 of our Lutheran youth gather for our National Youth Gathering. And what a better place for that weirdness to gather than New Orleans. I find that a bit ironic. And our motto for the gathering, as we have talked about recently, is Jesus, Justice, and Jazz. And we talked about this just a few weeks ago in a Bible study. That in going on this trip, in opening ourselves, our ordinary lives, to what God would have of us, we open ourselves to Jesus. And when we do that, when we learn from his example how to live, we find ourselves living and serving with justice. Once we are gathered with others who understand that they too have been called out of their ordinary lives to live and to serve, to be about peace and this justice, then we experience together when we are gathered jazz. Now, jazz is the kind of improvisational music where different instruments join together in unbridled passion, isn't it? Kind of like the joy that Jesus calls us to in our gospel lesson today. That my joy might be complete in them. There might be music, and not just any kind of music, jazz. You know, speaking of music, I remember the first concert I ever went to. And while this might date me, I will tell you that it was a band named Simple Minds. This was a Scottish band that was very much in the mold of U2, for those of you of my generation you might recall. And I remember one of their songs that I think is especially appropriate for this morning. It was a song entitled Sanctify Yourself. And the words went like this. One of the verses said, "You can't stop the world for a boy or a girl, sweet victims of poor circumstances. But you can pour back the love, sweeping down from above, giving hope and making more chances. Well, I hope and I pray that maybe someday you'll come back down here and show me the way." Almost a retelling of our gospel lesson, isn't it? You can almost hear the disciples calling out in this song to be open for God to come down. Now the refrain, which sounds very much like Jesus, the refrain says, "Control yourself. Love is all you need. Control yourself. Open up your heart. Sanctify yourself. Be a part of me. Sanctify yourself. Set yourself free." Appropriate, I think, given our gospel lesson for today. And appropriate that a secular, ordinary rock band sings about a non-secular religious ideal. We see in this song, we see in this band, the ordinary made holy or sanctified. Brothers and sisters, if we could do this, if we could open up our hearts and allow our ordinary lives to be set aside for holy purposes, then we truly would be considered weird. And we could then reflect this weirdness in a world that is so desperately in need of it. I close this morning with a passage from, for those of you who know, perhaps my favorite book, Brent and Manning's The Ragamuffin Gospel. And I've shared this passage before, but I think it is so fitting here that I do so again. This comes from chapter 6, entitled Grazie, Signore. Manning writes, in his book, Mortal Lessons, Richard Seltzer, M.D., writes, "I stand by the bed where a young woman lies, her face post-operative, her mouth twisted and palsied, clownish. A tiny twig of the facial nerve, the one to the muscles of her mouth, has been severed. She will be thus from now on. The surgeon had followed with religious fervor the curve of her flesh, I promise you that. Nevertheless, to remove the tumor in her cheek, I had to cut the little nerve. Her young husband is in the room. He stands on the opposite side of the bed, and together they seem to dwell in the evening lamplight, isolated from me, private. Who are they, I ask myself? He and this wry mouth that I have made, who gaze at each other and touch each other so generously. The young woman speaks. Will my mouth always be like this? She asks. Yes, I say, it will. It is because the nerve was cut. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles. I like it, he says. It's kind of cute. All at once I know who he is. I understand and I lower my gaze. One is not bold in an encounter with God. Unmindful, he bends to kiss her crooked mouth, and I am so close I can see how he twists his own lips to accommodate to hers, to show her that their kiss still works. My friends, may we be so twisted and so weird in our lives. May we open ourselves to be set aside and used by God so that we might reflect and accommodate in our lives God's holiness. A holiness that spills out of the love of Christ and makes even ordinary things